Hello. Today I want to talk about this moped kind of deal, or scooter or whatever, because it was really fun to model and it used a bunch of techniques that were pretty straightforward. And some of them I've talked about before, but a few of them I haven't. So yeah, let's get into it. This is the same bike I used in the grass clip here. Yeah, I'm happy with how that turned out too. I can talk about how the grass came together. It's basically just hair particles with a turbulence field moving across it, but maybe I'll do a video about that. And I also modeled it for this work in progress shot, which is honestly probably it looks too cool. Like these guys, there's gonna be some biker guys hanging out under a bridge, and just supposed to be a little like slice of life thing, but they look cool enough that I think the audience is gonna think like, oh, these are like important people, and they're not really. They're just supposed to be like random people. So I don't know. I'll figure that out. And I had a few ideas already in my head, but I think it's always a good idea to just look at some other reference, because real life is often pretty wild too, and different designs other people have come up with. And Pinterest is still a really great place to just find a bunch of different visual ideas. So I put together a little board here and just kind of looked at it and absorbed stuff and decided, like, I didn't want to recreate specifically one of them, but each one of these bikes has a little something to it that I kind of wanted to borrow. Like, I love this ribbing here, kind of this structural ribbing, and so I wanted to use some of that. I love the look. I mean, this little guy is just gorgeous, but also just the idea of having like a chain link kind of like railing inside a vehicle. I've never really thought of like combining that. And just this little like hinge down here. There's just cool stuff in there. And the idea that it's just made out of a few form-fit pieces of sheet metal wrapped around an engine and augmented by these like just steel rails that are kind of welded together, because that's all of this is pretty easy stuff to model, and you can borrow this visual language pretty easily. Yeah, I love the swoops in this one. That's really cool. This one is just bananas, and it's fun to look at shapes like this and kind of think like, okay, how could I model that? Like I'm not the best at modeling complex compound curves and things in general, but I could model a basic shape, and then I could use proportional editing to kind of like pull out certain bits, and I'll get into that later. But the big thing I really took away from this is a lot of times I think of bike type vehicles as this type of shape, where the handlebars are kind of like thin and diminutive, but there were some of these here that just had this big honking headlight shape, and I don't know what's going on in there. I don't know if they're like storing fuel, if maybe that's like the fuel tank. It looks like it could be. There's potentially a fuel cap there, but I like that, and that wasn't the way I'd ever really thought of that type of vehicle, so I decided to go in that direction. And the other thing I like is scooters are always so small that you see the engine somewhere. Like usually it's not totally wrapped up, or it's sticking out somewhere a little bit, and so you get this idea that the bike is just like this layer of something wrapped around something else. And for realism, I think that's really interesting from like a visual language, like design standpoint. Usually the stuff that's inside that you're not supposed to see is made with a different visual aesthetic as the stuff on the outside, like all the nice curved stuff. But a lot of times it's made using the same techniques. Like the top of a hood of a car can be this nice smooth metal curve, but like the inside will have all these ribs and kind of attachment points and things on it. But it's both made probably just from stamping a big sheet of sheet metal, and so it's like it's borrowing certain things. And I wanted to see if I could nail that kind of visual cohesion between the inside and the outside. To jumpstart the whole thing, Lux got this new drill press, which I really liked, and I decided to give it a quick scan. It wasn't the best scan, but I still used some booleans to chop it up into different pieces like that, and I kind of just made a little library out of that stuff, and I assembled those parts into kind of an interior bike kind of shape, which I think adds a lot, because it gives this feeling that, like, again, you can still see into it, and there's still stuff happening in there. In the final, a lot of this stuff is actually intersecting with the tire, and I'm just not worrying about that. But yeah, let's talk about this piece right here really fast, because this is the piece, usually before I start modeling something, I've already planned it out in my head a little bit, and this was the piece I was really excited about modeling. I wanted to have this big side panel that kind of like wrapped around the back in a single curve, join up with the other side. Because yeah, it just seemed just very, very excitingly utilitarian, nice and basic. And the idea of taking some basic big forms and kind of cramming them full of little engine greebles and stuff, I thought could be an interesting visual balance. One thing I didn't really intend was to have the whole back be open like this, but I don't know, I kind of like it. I will admit that, like, the visual language of the back here doesn't really match, you know, the overly overbuilt front. It's fine. Okay, but these little ribs here, let me just show you how I modeled those, because it's really easy. You take your shape here, and in this case, I had some other stuff kind of going on here, and select these. Control B to bevel. We got our nice curve, and these ribs are based around the edge loops, and so I like adding those really early on in the modeling process, so I make sure I leave space for them effectively. So I'm gonna hit Control R, scroll up a few times, add those ridges, left click to apply, and I want them only in the middle of the panel here, so I'm going to add a few more edge loops here and here. Then I can select these 3 edges, and if I hit Control B, we can bevel it, and normally beveling splits the difference between 2 different faces. So if we have a cube here, you know, these are perpendicular to each other. If we bevel it, it's just splitting the difference between this face here and this face. But if the 2 faces are flat, like this one and this one, and you bevel it, it just adds a bunch more geometry without actually visually affecting anything, which is useful for us. So let's go back here, bevel these. I'm going to scroll down till they just have one edge sandwiched by 2 other edges here, and I'm going to retract the selection, select more or less. You can see we've got Control Numpad plus and negative. I use that a lot, so Control negative here, and if we hit Alt S, it'll move out along its surface direction. And look at that, we can already get its, we already got the look we're kind of going for. I'm gonna re-expand the selection here and bevel again, and there we go. We've got our nice ribbing, and I mean that's so fast. And if we want, we can go in here, and here, let's give a little bit more space. Select these points and hit Control Shift B, just to smooth that out, and look at that. We've got a piece that looks like it could conceivably just be stamped out of a single piece of metal. And yeah, but I'm loving this technique. Like here, let's create a barrel really fast. We'll do this, select this, extrude, scale it, extrude, I to inset, extrude it back down to give it that lip. Control R to add an edge loop, scroll up to add another one, Control B to bevel, and make sure we have the right number of edge loops here by scrolling up and down. Control let's make it a little bit fatter like that. Yeah. Control negative, Alt S, let's make it nice and big. Control plus, Control B, and yeah, there we go. We've got a nice barrel shape. That's really easy. So yeah, that worked really good, and also combining it with a good material is really handy. One thing, actually, to jump all over the place, my first attempt at a material didn't work very well because let's see. Because the first material I had was this green one, because I thought, I don't know, I just really liked how this looked. That was the kind of metal that I wanted to kind of capture. But even when I tried to line this up with the contours of the piece, all of these bolts and seams here, like, the reason you do the ribbing on the metal is to reinforce a large kind of standalone piece of metal. But if I have these seams and rivets here, that implies you're attaching multiple pieces of metal, so the different visual techniques were kind of contradicting each other. So it worked a lot better once I went to like a contiguous piece of metal. Although my guess is this might actually work kind of okay if I lined up the seams and rivets so they're only at the very top and bottom of the piece, kind of like that maybe. And another thing you can do, although things start to get kind of weird, I'm going to select all of these pieces right here, turn on proportional editing, which means you get to scroll up and down to control how wide the influence is. And I'm going to hit Control Alt Shift S for slant. And if I do that, I can actually straighten out these UVs here. And I'll do the same thing with this stuff over here, Control Alt Shift S. And ideally, that kind of, again, makes this so that it's easier to line up with a texture, although in this case, again, it's looking kind of weird. Actually, the Control-Alt-Shift-S slant hotkey is really useful. It works in the UV editor, but it also works for modeling, and I use that all the time. Here, let's select all of the stuff at the beginning, deselect this tire, tab into edit mode, and hit A to select everything, and then, because I tend to model everything just a little bit too square like this. You can see everything just feels a little bit cubic, and that bugs me. But I can model that way, then at the very end go in and hit Control-Alt-Shift-S and give everything this nice kind of slope to it, fix things up, and then suddenly you get this whole other look. This is pushing it a little bit, but I did use this for the taxi. In fact, I mean, now it's kind of obvious after I say that, but yeah, the whole thing was just feeling like it was too much of a beveled cube, and now it has a little little bit of an aerodynamic slant to it, and the door and everything just kind of has that nice matching angle to it that makes it feel like it was kind of designed. And yeah, it would have been really tricky to get that angle consistent, you know, however many degrees that is, through the entire modeling process. And so just modeling square and slanting at the end is a nice little trick. These rails here, I love adding rails to stuff. Again, just very utilitarian is the name of the game in this case, but it also helps you define, you know, it adds a lot of interest to the silhouette. Get all these little pieces kind of sticking out like this, and you can take what's otherwise a very basic model and suddenly, you know, just add a lot more form to it. It means there's layers and kind of things occluding other things, and it's so easy to add. Here, let me show you. So I just took this starting piece right here, and I think this was before I added all these other edge loops, but here, I'll just show you with this stuff right here. So I'll select this loop here, hit Shift D, Alt S to move it out along its normal, or I'll just kind of pull it out, hit P, separate by selection, so it's its own object, and then if I hit F3, convert to curve, that gives us the curve tools here, and under geometry and bevel, I can turn up the depth a little bit. And look at that, we've just turned that curve into a little rail. Right click, shade auto smooth. And then what I can do is I can hit F3, convert back into a mesh, and if we tab in, we can see all of our geometry. And I can add an edge loop, Control B to bevel it. Let's go into face selection mode. And if I hit Alt E, extrude faces along normals, that fattens that up a little bit. And here, let's add one more edge loop here, bevel that out, and grab these pieces, and this makes a mount, so you can attach it to a thing. Here, let's hit SY0 to flatten that, extrude scale, extrude, and yeah. And what's fun is you can actually do a lot of these at once. Like if we get this loop and then two more down here, we'll grab all of them, you can bevel all of that, Alt E, extrude faces along normals, grab all of these inner pieces like this, and extrude them in if you want. Let's see, we could go to individual origins, scale them all down and make them thinner, bring them on in, and just again, an easy way to add a lot of visual interest to a thing. I'm gonna check auto smooth, clean all of that up. And I thought it'd be fun to mount the tail lights and the turn signals and stuff on one of these rails too, kind of using the rails to keep the contours of the bike going like that, even though it's just a few rails going. I thought that was kind of fun. Oh, this heat vent here. There's two different reasons I think basically you'd have a hole. Well, three. You can have air intakes, like it's like a vent. In this case, I think this is just a vent to allow heat to disperse from the engine. And then you have stuff where the metal's going to get so hot, it's actually going to potentially warp. And so you have these holes there to give it room to kind of expand into itself without permanently deforming. And that's that shape you kind of get around like mufflers or like gun, you know, heat dispersion sinks, I think. In fact, let's model one of those right now, just because there's some fun ways to do it. I used to do it with a bunch of booleans and stuff. It was a little bit overkill. Let's scroll this up a little. Add some more edge loops here till everything's kind of square, and go select, checker deselect, just to get every other hole selected. That's such a fun. I've been using checker deselect so much lately. And remember, Control B bevels an edge, Control Shift B bevels individual points, and if we scroll up, we can add a little bit more geometry, and if we hit P, we can change the profile of all of this. And here, let's even add a little more geometry there. Yeah! Gonna go into face selection mode, and I'm gonna hit Control X to dissolve all the unnecessary geometry inside the holes, Alt E to extrude them all in, and X to delete those faces, and there we go. It's really, here, let's go into shade auto smooth, and maybe change the angle of the auto smooth, and yeah, there we go. We've got our nice Swiss cheese kind of look. But in this case, it was as easy as just here. Let's get our cylinder going. Tab into edit mode. Grab these, extrude them down, shrink it, rotate. I just duplicated it all out a few times. And then here, right click, set origin to geometry, so it scales right there. And you can stick it wherever you want, intersecting this panel. And because I have the Bool Tool add-on activated in the preferences, I can just intersect them like this, select this, shift click on the panel, and control negative on the numpad, and it doesn't work! That's good, because that means I can show you what to do if it doesn't work, go into modifiers, and change it from exact to fast. Isn't that weird? Yeah, that's kind of weird. But yeah, it's kind of fun modeling in 2D, or like, you know, the curves are in 3D space, but it's just these flat pieces. There's no depth to it. And what's fun about it is it's just easier to model. Like if I want to use proportional editing or something, I don't have to worry about bringing both the inside and the outside face. There's just one surface that I'm grabbing. And then at the end, I can go through and add my solidify modifier. And here, maybe turn it up a little bit. And everything gets that depth back, but I don't have to have a bunch of redundant, you know, vertices floating around. Actually, yeah, let's talk about proportional editing really fast. Because that's just like the slanting, a fun thing you can do at the end. If we, here, we'll go into solid view. Select all of this stuff. It's probably not going to be happy. Like some of these objects I'm instancing more than once. You can see right here. And so if I try to modify the geometry of one of them, it's going to be like, whoa, what are you doing? But let's see what happens if I just select this whole shape, tab into edit mode, and with proportional editing turned on here, grab a piece like that, and okay, right now it's only grabbing one piece, although even that, like, can you imagine putting like a little windshield shape in there? That would be really cool. Maybe I'll do that. Anyways, yes, the proportional editing is only grabbing this one object. Let's go into the settings here and uncheck connected only. Go into the side view, and now if we grab this, we can easily twist and pull and modify the entire bike shape. And what I like is you can kind of do this really easily at the end and just affect a lot of geometry at once. Because like this piece right here feels exactly what it is, which is I had a shape like this and I extruded it out that way, and I kind of beveled it a little bit, but not a lot. But if we tab into edit mode, let's just grab some of these ones right here in the middle. With proportional editing on, I can add a nice curve into that. And there we go. Just kind of make it a little bit more interesting. Or let's see. Let's select this. Shift right click to set the 3D cursor. Change the origin point to 3D cursor, and I can pull things around that point. Add some more interesting shapes like that in a way which, again, would have been really hard to model if I were just extruding stuff to begin with. Okay, let's grab all of this. Not the tire. Tab into edit mode. Grab this stuff in the back, and let's just play around with this shape more. Like, look at that. That's so easy, and that looks kind of cool. Let's push geometry in a way it doesn't really want to go. I'll grab this, pull this up, and yeah, that bit doesn't work quite as well because I don't have enough geometry really in this area. But it's still looking kind of weird. Like you can see if you had a little bit more geometry in this bit here, it has potential. Like that's a really interesting kind of scooter shape. Kind of looks like a snail or something. Ooh, a snail could be a good kind of reference for modeling a scooter, I guess. Actually, yeah, let's see what happens. I'm gonna grab this face here, change the origin to median point between those two, and if I scale them outwards like that and just make it a big orb in the back. Oh, that's interesting. I'd have to do a bunch of cleanup and stuff, but yeah, that's kind of fun. Anyways, I don't tend to model particularly whimsically, but this is as close as I get, where I take a fairly squared up model and then I start pulling things in just crazy directions like this. I like this orb bike. And oh yeah, kind of matching this this ribbing technique. Adding trim is so fun because it, again, just helps you define the contours and it adds nice shiny areas which can make the object more interesting and kind of gives it that nice retro 50s, 60s, whatever kind of feeling. I'm gonna go into the side mirror here, tab into edit mode, hit Control R to add our little edge loop. I don't want it to go all the way to the end, so I'm just gonna grab these central ones here. Hit Control B to bevel, scroll down so we just have that one piece in the middle. I mean, and there's a lot of different ways you can go about this, but here, Control negative to retract the selection, Alt S to move it out along normals, Control B to smooth that out, and if I hit Control plus to expand the selection just a little bit more, and if we wanted, we could even hit Alt E, extrude faces along normals, just to add a little bit of like shadow and overlap there. Create a new material. New, assign, gonna make it glossy, I suppose, turn down the roughness, and there we go. We've got our nice piece of metal trim, and there's a lot of different ways to go about this. Like this stuff here, you can kind of see what I did. But yeah, I'm just kind of doing that all over the place. Control B, bevel here, Alt E, extrude faces along normals. I'm gonna Alt Shift click on these two loops here, bevel those out, expand the selection. Make them chrome. One thing I've been doing, which is maybe overkill, is adding these little seams where the trim kind of meets up with itself, and that's as easy to do as just adding another edge loop, Control R, sliding it down to right there, and hitting Alt S to move it along the normal. and you can just pop it out like this, and that just implies that everything doesn't fit together perfect. You're just adding a little seam, and you could give it more love if you wanted, but for me, a lot of times from a distance, that's already more than enough. And oh yeah, I've updated how I do my turn signals and stuff too, because I used to just take a picture of a turn signal and make it an emissive material, and I was like, there we go. But I actually like being able to see like something going on inside of it. And so I have my refractive kind of outer shell glass piece, and then inside I just have a few, you know, glowing filaments or whatever, and you can make these as interesting as you want. Could be kind of cool if you had them as like a circle or something. Let's extrude that in, duplicate, extrude that in, duplicate, fill that. It'll probably look like exactly what it is, but let's assign our turn signal glow to it. Set the origin to the geometry. I don't know. You know, at least we're doing something, I guess. It looks like we made some sort of decision. Actually, it's growing on me a little bit. The glass itself here. I'll just get rid of everything and give it a new kind of a headlight cover material. And there's a bunch of ways to do this. If you just go glass, it can be kind of interesting. Here we can turn up the roughness, and like that's a cool look. But let's give it kind of a more headlighty bump map. So I'm gonna hit Control T to bring up all of this mapping stuff. But I wanted to go into the normal here through a bump map, which will make it actually, you know, bumpy. Load in like some kind of headlight type image here, and change it from going into the normal to going into the height, because it's just basically converting the image into a grayscale height map, and so we want to tell the bump map that. The distance, we don't want the bump any bigger than like a centimeter, so let's say like 0.0, you know, a fourth of a centimeter, and even still I'm going to turn the strength down, and I'm going to go into the UV editor here, select this and hit U, project from view, and line it up right here on the light, and hopefully this looks kind of okay. I don't know. One thing that's useful to keep in mind when you're working with glass shaders is it's expecting the glass to be the appropriate thickness. Like right now, this is treating this entire chunk as a single piece of glass with just a filament floating in the middle of this solid glass chunk. And when the path tracer is calculating a beam of light going into it, it refracts it once when it goes in and another time when it exits again. So right now the glass is, you know, technically like this thick, and it should only be like this thick. So a lot of times I'll make sure I have a little solidify modifier going on, which just gives this entire thing a little bit of thickness, and it means that everything renders just a little bit more realistically. Here you can see the difference here as opposed to that, although this strength of the bump is still pretty intense. In this case, I might turn up the roughness of the glass and also add a glossy shader here, mix those together. I'm gonna make the glossy really smooth, and yeah, that's an interesting, you know, you have the roughness and the refraction, but also this nice clean layer on top, and you get to decide how much of which is which, but that's kind of a fun look. I don't know, but then it looks cool when you just move around, playing with refraction and all of that. I love actually putting lighting filaments and all of that stuff together. You don't want them to light your scene, particularly. Like, you want to be able to cheat it. If I wanted this to actually cast a light, what I would do is I would put a proper light source in there, inside. And here, let's make it kind of that same type of yellow-orange, because Path Tracer is a lot more optimized for finding proper light sources, as opposed to like emissive materials on mesh objects where it has to refract through a thing in order to find it. So I'd add this light, then I'd select this object, and I would just, under Object Properties, turn off uncheck shadow for ray visibility, so the light can really easily cast everything without having to like refract through a thing, which is going to give you a lot more fireflies and noise and a lot longer render times. This currently looks a little weird, so instead of a point light, I might make it an area light and shrink it down in the right size, and you can stick it right in there. But you can kind of see it refracted through the glass a little bit, so sometimes I just move it right outside, so it's still casting a nice light on the ground. Here, let's add a ground, without causing any weird render artifacts or anything like that. And I like this way because you get to independently control the amount of light being cast from the light and the way you want the light to look itself. Although I might go in and make this be like, you know, way brighter so it actually seems to kind of match that. Ooh, that's nice. But you can just, that's cozy. that feels kind of painterly. Yeah, I'm just really happy with how this bike reacts to light, and a lot of that's because there's translucent bits like with the different headlights, and there's reflective shiny bits catching the light up here. Yeah, I'm gonna try to add more shiny translucent bits onto stuff. In fact, sometimes as I'm modeling lately, I'll stop and think like, is there a place I could stick a translucent thing on top of there just to have more interesting interplay with the light in the scene. Like, let's try it back here. Let's see, let's change this to the headlight cover material. Make sure that we have a solidify modifier on there so it actually has some depth to it. I'm gonna put a little point light inside. That's kind of cool. Let's see, I want to turn the bump map way down here. And is that my light? Yeah, we'll make that a nice kind of orange or something. And yeah, that's pretty cool. I want to make like a whole vehicle like that. That'd be nifty. And the last thing I want to talk about is this leather seat. It doesn't look great, but it kind of gets the job done, and it does a lot of things we've already been talking about here. Let's create a cube. I think the big problem is I keep kind of modeling it without looking at reference, so I'm kind of just being like, yeah, you know, it's a cushion, it's like this, and then you bevel it, and it's, you know, just a soft box, which is kind of true, but I think actual cushions like are actually more angular than I might think. So I'm gonna try keeping this a little bit yeah, firmer like that. I'm gonna add some more edge loops here and right here, and turn on proportional editing. Let's pull down the bit where the butt goes, and this is where the other parts go. I can always go through and add a little bit more geometry here. And I also kind of want to make it feel as if it's been scrunched a little bit. So here, let's add a few edge loops. This one's gonna go out, and this one's gonna go in, and maybe kind of, you know, make them a little bit off kilter here. And I might actually grab some of these and just, with proportional editing still on, just rotate them a little bit. Just add a little bit more noise and irregularity to the whole thing. Right click, shade smooth, and that seems like that could be good. It helps you want to think in terms of they are actually wrapping a single piece of leather around a cushion, and so you can't just like inflate leather like a balloon, really. I don't think. So I'm gonna get rid of all this stuff here in the back. Delete that. Give it this leather material here, and the leather is just a picture of leather from cgtextures.com. At some point I'd love to find something a little bit better, but this works okay for now. Right now this is just how it default unwraps with the cube. I'm gonna hit U, unwrap, and it'll try to kind of unwrap it as one piece. I think these are the front corners right here, and so if I line those up with these worn areas, hopefully it'll kind of feel like, yeah, that's where some people kind of come in and sit down a little bit. Or, ooh, maybe we'll do it on this front edge right here, so you kind of get that worn bit right there. Everything else, I'm going to use proportional editing just to kind of try to tuck this stuff in like that. And this stuff is under the overhang right here, so I'm not, well, actually, just to make my life easier, I might select this loop here, and come on. Expand the selection, hit U, unwrap, and since I have UV squares add-on activated, I think it comes with Blender, I can hit to grid by shape, which kind of cleans it up like this, and I can just line it up somewhere down here like that, which I think works pretty good. And the last thing I'm going to do is something we've already done quite a bit today. I'm going to tab into edit mode, select this loop here, Shift D to duplicate, P, separate by selection to make it into its own object of just these vertices. Right click, because you can do it this way too. Thank you to whoever it was that pointed that out. Convert it to a curve. So under the curve settings, we can turn up our depth to add that little kind of like fold over, rolled over bit here. Right click, convert it back into a mesh, and when we Control J, join it back, it's going to give us that same material back. And we can always use cube projection. There's a lot of ways we can do this, but I'm just going to kind of stick it somewhere where kind of will match the underlaying stuff. And yeah, that's a pretty reasonable cushion. I think, honestly, the secret is to just really put in some tiny, like, even this smoothness of this proportional editing feels a little bit weird. I want to shrink that down and really just get some nice sharp stuff in there. Maybe shrink this and bevel it. I don't know. You get the idea. Yeah, that works. That works great. That works much better than this weird marshmallow one over here. I think that's it. I'm trying to get caught up. I have this big list of stuff. I'm like, oh, I should make a video about that. But we keep doing shoots and stuff, which I'm excited to show you about. But yeah. Anyways, hopefully there's something useful in there. I will talk to you soon. Have a good one.